Hey, you guys, I'm Tracy Johnson. I'm the Oldham County Extension Agriculture Agent. I see some familiar faces in here, but there's some of you guys I don't know. So I'm pleased to meet some new people today. If you don't know what extension is, there's one in every county. We have an ag agent, a family consumer sciences agent, and that's where 4-H youth programs are run out of, your county extension office. Extension is part of the University of Kentucky and Kentucky State University. If you guys didn't know that already. And we offer services to everybody. We do classes, field days like this all through the year, and then we offer services like pondweed identification and control recommendations. And we do have several vendors here, lots of businesses, but we also have a local agency that is very important for us, a partner agency, and that's the Natural Resources Conservation Service. If you're not familiar with that entity and you have a farm, you need to get to know them. Mr. Calvin Bohannon is here with us. He is a pond guru. If you have questions about a leaky pond, how you should fix a pond, where you should locate a pond, he is your man. So make sure and visit with Calvin before you leave today. I want to thank Crystal Lake Club for hosting us. Jim has been instrumental in planning this field day and helping us get together how we should offer it and who should be here. I want to thank Becca Truman, who's going to be your next speaker. She's the Curry Sport Watershed Director, and she and I have partnered on a lot of things, and she'll tell you more about what she does. And before I go, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our other two speakers this morning. Amanda Gumbert is a water quality specialist and person extraordinaire from the University of Kentucky. And Forrest Wynne is with Kentucky State University. He's our aquaculture specialist and another wealth of information for you guys. So thank you for being here. Becca.
Quicker a little bit. Well, just reiterating, thank you so much to Tracy, to Jim, to Amanda, to Forrest, to all the vendors and suppliers that are here today, as well as all of you. It really shows the importance of this topic to have so many people show up on a Saturday morning in this room today. I don't know the last time I saw this many people at a workshop, so it's really exciting. So let's see if I can get this to work. Is it turned on? There's a switch on the side. It is. Now let me turn it off and back on. Let's try.
There's what, somebody just sit here and just.
If this is the worst thing that happens today, we're in great shape.
I'll just manually advance.
Now, let's try it out.
Oh, there you go. Oh, no, that was you. Agenda. I'll just remind you that the agenda is over here. It looks like they're all out, so hopefully you got one, and the resources on the back there. And then, as Tracy said, so I'm the Curry Sport Watershed Coordinator, and I don't know if there's a pointer here, but Curry Sport Watershed, a lot of people haven't heard of it. This little area in blue right here, so we've got Oldham County. This little area in blue includes part of 71, LaGrange, down into Crestwood here. That's the Curry Sport Watershed. So it's not the only watershed in Oldham County, but it is our most urban watershed, and it's our watershed with our greatest concerns for streams and pollution and water quality. And so that has led to having this position of the watershed coordinator. So I work for Oldham County Fiscal Court. My position and the work that we do is funded through grants through the Kentucky Division of Water. So lots of partnerships there. And some of you might live in the Curry Sport Watershed. I hope you figure out which watershed you live in, because that's really important. But a lot of what we do is applicable to anybody, regardless of where you live. But we do have some specific funding programs that is going to be specific to Curry Sport Watershed residents. So what do we do? So as I mentioned, we're a grant-funded environmental program, again, supported by Oldham County Fiscal Court, who I work for, and then funded by Division of Water. And broadly, we work to engage the community in efforts to reduce pollution, and protect waterways. So that includes all kinds of topics that you can imagine happen in a watershed that lead to concerns with pollution and habitat and erosion in lakes and ponds. So we work on stream restoration, tree plantings, rain barrels, rain gardens, pollinator gardens, septic system repair, and a lot more. And then we really focus on educational workshops, providing funding opportunities, and then getting the public together to have these conversations, to learn and to work together to make some improvements. So my information is here. The best way to stay connected is on our Facebook page. We have Prairies Fork Watershed. We've also got a YouTube page. So I'll note that this workshop, I'm hoping it's working properly, is being recorded, and then that's going to be available on our YouTube page, and I'll share it with whoever would like it. So if you want to share it with somebody, refer back to what one of the speakers said and so forth, that'll be available later on as well. And I'll also note that your time here today is also important because it's counting towards grant match, which we need in order to receive federal funds. So thank you again for that. And I'll just take a quick minute to make note here of our pollinator garden initiative in Oldham County. And one of the connections and why I really want to make a point to say this to the group is that Amanda's really going to hit on buffers and lake and pond buffers, and that all connects back to pollinator gardens, native plants, the importance of these plants they can have on our landscape. So this is a really great way to get involved in learning about native plants. So we've got a couple of gardens here in Oldham County that we work on maintaining. We've got one down the street, LaGrange Main Street garden there that's been there for about 3 seasons now, and it's looking really awesome. And then we just planted one this year at the Oldham LaGrange Library. So we do have meetups, and we're asking for people to come and help maintain these gardens and just get connected. We do seed collections, seed swaps, plant swaps, and different events. So if you're interested in kind of taking this knowledge today to focus on plants, then please connect with me and I'll be happy to get you involved. And for that, I'm going to pass it off to Dr. Amanda Gumbert.
This one right here too, Tracy.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Becca and Tracy. And yes, there are a couple of seats up front. We're used to this in extension. Everybody fills the back rows first and then they come up. But yeah, absolutely. So I'm Amanda Gumbert and I work for the extension service like Tracy. While Tracy serves Oldham County, I serve the whole state, but I focus on water issues. So I'm going to talk a little bit about buffer zones and sedimentation, but I'm going to probably creep a little bit over into plants. We'll talk a little bit about specific things on that realm as well. But I want to also clarify that Forrest Wynne, also person extraordinaire, because he and I team up really well. I think we talk to one another a lot. We get similar questions, but we don't always know who has the best answer. Forrest knows much more about ponds and lakes than I do. I typically focus on moving water and streams and stream buffers, but the same concepts apply. So if there's a spot in here where you're like, well, that's not a pond or a lake, let's want to go backwards. Then just go, wait a minute, it all really relates. What I'm really going to focus on are those transition zones between the water body and the upland land use. So just kind of open your mind a little bit to that. But I have a question first, because I like to have a little interaction, and it's Saturday morning. Y'all could be anywhere, and I'm glad you're here, but I don't want you to fall asleep on me. So my question to you, first of all, is why do we care about water? Because we drink it and we need it. Okay, we'll stop there. Hang on. Yes, others?
Ask somebody in California.
Ask somebody in California why we care about water. Absolutely. Ask us like 2 days ago why we care about water. Yes, sir.
Well, having a desirable lake makes property values go up.
Okay, so a desirable lake, and so that's really a good point, because I don't want to jump in and define what desirable means for you, but if you're going to raise your property value, I'm going to guess you want clean water. Right? Why else? One in the back.
Isn't water the majority of the globe?
Oh, that is a perfect segue. Thank you. She was not planted. She was not planted, I promise. So this visual is something I like to kind of keep in mind when I think about water on Earth. And water is the majority of what covers the surface of the Earth, right? So roughly 97% of that water, though, is ocean water, so salt water. But if we pull out that 3% that's left of fresh water, we still kind of, in most time, in general, most of the time in Kentucky, we have plenty of water. do not, withheld from that assessment. But we have this really small portion, and I'm afraid to touch these. This is the middle one. There we go. Okay, so we have this 3%, and a bunch of that is in glaciers for now.
Yeah.
A large portion is also underground or held in the soil, one of my favorite places on Earth. And so we have this tiny little bit, less than 1% of fresh water in our rivers and lakes. And in Kentucky, we use a lot of surface water for our drinking water, for recreation. And so it's important for us to take care of that water. Now, I mentioned in Kentucky, we are rich in water resources most of the time. We have over 90,000 miles of streams and rivers and about 440,000 acres of lakes. Those are the stats that, forgive me, my divisional water folks, but I think these are round numbers that we can all work with. That's a lot of water. The problem that we typically have in Kentucky is not water quantity, but water quality. And that's where all of us come to play into the equation. And so we kind of think about water and like, I don't know, what do you think about this water? Does that look good?
It's clear.
It's clear-ish, yeah. Any issues? I heard it. There's some algae, there's some duckweed, and there's sediment in there, right? There's sediment so we don't know that we have a real great habitat there. And this is my friend Miriam, who is an absolute expert in algae. She's incredible to spend time with. But so she's taken a look at that water sample she takes that and looks at it under a microscope to really figure out what's going on. The best I know about algae is I know Miriam. And so we're friends. The problem that we have sometimes in these small ponds, lakes, are that we have these algae issues. And the concern is if they become harmful, if they have toxins that are in those waters. And if we have something that looks like this, the answer is don't touch it, don't let your pet in it, certainly don't drink it. There's some issue going on there. And so nutrient pollution is where we start getting into these problems. We can do much better than this as folks who manage land adjacent to streams, ponds, lakes, rivers, by maintaining buffer zones. When we get situations like this, it's because we've got too much nutrient, and I mean like nitrogen and phosphorus. Nutrients are good for us, right? As humans, we eat things that are nutritious, but when we have too much nutrient, and we're talking about fertilizer typically in some form, nitrogen or phosphorus, too much in our water bodies and sunlight, and that leads to these algae blooms. Now, I know I'm a fish people and my pond managers are like, wait a minute, we got to have enough stuff for the fish to eat. So I don't want to get into that because this is the part that I know about more of the too much and pollution issues of it. But we'll learn a little bit more today together. And I say all of this because this is kind of what I lean back on. This quote from Luna Leopold, and basically saying that water is a reflection of how we live on the land. What we do on the surface of the earth is reflected in the quality of the water that we have. And so if we kind of base our decisions and our actions on this and reflect back to it, it helps us put things in perspective. So I'm going to talk about buffer zones. And so you're probably like, what the heck is she going to talk about? So just to kind of get everybody on the same page, buffer zones are kind of this greenish tan area on this diagram. So this is our water body. In this case, it's moving water, but it's that zone between the edge of the water and whatever we're doing on the upland side of things. It could be a forest, it could be a lawn, it could be a crop field, it could be livestock, whatever that might be. That buffer zone is what I'm talking about. And we typically have different layers of vegetation there. Sometimes we don't, but sometimes we do. And I like to see the vegetation. So I like to think of it in zones, and keep in mind, this is a perfect scenario, right? This is like textbook scenario of how we protect water bodies. Is we have taller trees next to the water body. So we create some shade to regulate the water temperature. And we also have roots that are holding the soil in place, whether that's a stream bank or the edge of the lake, the pond. Now, I know with ponds, People don't like trees because you don't like it in the dam and all that. So understand that there are certain limitations on that. But in general, I like to see trees. So when I pulled up, I'm like looking out and seeing how many trees you got around your lake. So, and then the next layer would be shrubs. So those are smaller trees and shrubs. Those are going to give us a different kind of root system underneath. And then we have like grasses and forbs. And what that means by that is usually like perennials, things that bloom. These are pretty, things that make us happy when we see them. But all of those things and a mixture of these types of vegetation also provide wildlife habitat. Sometimes I try to sell this to audiences and they're like, we don't want the wildlife. Thank you very much. I do not want the deer eating everything. If we have enough deer, we have enough habitat. But when I think of wildlife, I'm also thinking about reptiles and amphibians. I'm thinking about birds. I'm thinking about pollinators, insects, those things that make a diverse ecosystem that help to regulate all of our human activity. So benefits of healthy buffers. This is kind of like my platform here. Like if I had one slide, this would be it. Filtering runoff water. So when we have vegetation that's on that buffer zone, it will filter runoff water that is going from an upstream action or whatever we're doing around the house, around the farm, around whatever kind of land use we've got going on. It will physically buffer it by having the actual stems. So when we have grasses, tall grasses, native grasses, the actual stems will filter out water. It slows the water down. And if we have any kind of sediment or dirt that's in the water, it has a chance to settle out. You know, slower moving water will settle out sediment. So that's what those stems are doing, those plants are doing. Also, it'll also uptake some of the nutrients that might be there. I also think a lot about the roots, and I think my next slide is the roots. This is one of my favorite. I'm going to go back and forth. This is one of my favorites. Look at these root systems. The scale here is in feet. This is like 10 feet deep for switchgrass. Say what you want about switchgrass. It's a native grass. And look at that root system. This right here, that's mowed turf. So turf has really, really shallow root systems. Having these root systems are what holds our soil in place. When we think of bigger trees, we're thinking about bigger roots. Diameter of the roots are bigger. So we've got biomass below ground as well as above. But I'm really nerdy. And so I think about carbon a lot. And I think about what those roots are doing. And every year, some of them die and decompose. And as that decomposition process happens, we're hopefully storing some carbon in our soil. And all those, I don't know, the little teeny tiny things that live there, we'll just go with that. All of the microorganisms that are living in our soil have something to eat. Carbon is their powerhouse. And so we're providing them that with that root system. So again, I told you, super nerdy. This is why I'm here on Saturday morning, right? So we're uptaking excess nutrients also. If you happen to fertilize your lawn and you have a water body adjacent to your lawn, if you don't put it on at the right time and the right rate and go to Tracy to get a soil test, then you have the risk of those nutrients getting into your water body. And that's when we start feeding algae to a point that we don't want to. And so having those riparian, that's one of our slang terms, right? That's one of our, that buffer that's along the water, that's there to uptake some of those nutrients as well. Protecting the bank from erosion, reducing flood damage because it can slow the water down. Now, some folks don't like that. I've been run out of 1 or 2 meetings because I said you should leave stuff along the stream banks. And my grandfather and I used to arm wrestle over this too, because he's like, you know, all these trees are just slowing the water down. It's going to flood my field and flood this and flood that and cause problems for my property. But if we just go in and clear out everything, we're just sending the water faster downstream and at a greater velocity, and we start to have bigger flood issues downstream too. I mentioned regulating water temperature, wildlife habitat, and somebody mentioned their property values. So I think that's always on all of our minds if we own property. And personally, I think that a little splash of color and something growing on the stream or the pond is a nice asset instead of just mowed turf. But some of this is perception, and I totally understand that. So we have to consider that as well. So, but really protecting banks from erosion, and that's where this deeply rooted vegetation comes to play. Yes, ma'am.
So how wide of a buffer zone do you recommend?
You all are amazing. You're amazing. Let me talk to you about it.
Yes.
So, establishing buffer zones. It's unbelievable. I did not share these slides. Okay, so here's some things that we talk about with the buffer. Now, this is in an ag landscape, so forgive me, this is where a lot of my pictures come from. But this is a stream that ran through a field. We had horses over here. We put a fence up, and Lord, I was about run out of town because, man, that looked wild and woolly and scraggly, and I was obviously not a good farmer. But we talk about width, and there's lots of different factors, and I'm going to get to it. We have planting strategies to think about. Maintenance is a big one. What do you have the capability of for maintenance? And what are your neighbors going to tolerate? What does your HOA tolerate? Is there a weed ordinance? What are all those factors that play into it? So that kind of goes to that visual desires and tolerance. And a lot of time it's based on what function you want, how much time you've got, and what resources you have, meaning really time and money, right? So buffer width. The width of your buffer will determine the benefits that you get from it. So the wider the better is always my answer, but I'll take whatever you'll give me. But for bank protection and for reducing sedimentation or soil loss, 15 to 20 feet. Now, sometimes people kind of jump back a little bit when I say 15 to 20 feet. I'll take a mower's width. If you're not willing to give me 15 feet, I'll take 6, right? 1 foot is just kind of going to look like, well, you kind of made an effort. You showed up, but maybe you didn't bring your homework, right? You came to class, but you didn't make much effort. So we'll give you a little credit, but if you give me a little bit more, you're going to get more points. So that's what we like to see. Now, this is where they really flinch, is when I say 100 to 160 feet. That's typically when we have extreme slopes and we have situations where we're doing more impactful, I guess, land use upstream or upslope. And nobody ever gives me a 160-foot buffer, except maybe if they've got Forrest that they're not going to do anything with it. So I'm sorry that this is small, but this is in several of our publications. Maybe it's not even in one of those. But basically what I want you to put your eye on are these little boxes. And the farther back we go from the water body, the more benefits you get. So the top one is 10, this is 10 to 40 feet. This is stream bank stabilization and enhancing the aquatic food web. And then as we get 10 to 70, we get water temperature moderation. So still 10 to 20, you're also to 20, you're going to get a little bit of nutrient removal or protection from contamination. So if you're in that 10 to 15, 20 foot range, you're going to get several benefits from having that buffer. When you get farther out is where you start to get more sediment control, flood control, and the wider the better with wildlife habitat.
Amanda?
Yes.
So could you talk a little bit about, we're talking about the buffer zone and what it does. Does that mean it's okay to apply pesticides and fertilizer in your buffer zone?
No. So when I think of a buffer, that really just means an area that I'm going to plant either passively by just creating a no-mow zone, or I'm going to plant it very deliberately. When you're thinking about the community that I think most of you all are representing, you probably want to think about a deliberate planting system, because you might get run out by your neighbor when you have this wild and woolly no-mow zone. Although I'm all about that, because in time and resources, it doesn't take too much to just walk away from.
So, sorry, just one more question. All the pictures you're showing are kind of sparsely planted. They look quite loose. I mean, like I have a buffer zone. The reason I asked that is my husband and I fight over the width of it. But it's only about 5 feet, but it is so dense and it's about yay high.
Right.
And you cannot get through it. It also keeps the geese out of the yard.
Absolutely, because they don't.
But
Right.
it seems to be quite effective, and it's much denser than that.
So a lot
And
of-
there's trees and
Yeah, some of these are young.
Okay.
So what I show you sometimes are the initial planting of the buffers.
Okay.
This buffer is about 10 years old now. It looks nothing like this.
Okay,
It is very dense and you can't really walk through it.
yeah,
And what happens is, so in this particular case, hang on, let me get back to answering Tracy's
Yeah.
question, is we plant, we do some level of maintenance, but maintenance does not include applying pesticides or fertilizers, unless you have an invasive species that you're trying to control. And oftentimes we have to utilize herbicides to get rid of some invasive plants. It's just unfortunately kind of how we are, where we are in the system.
Can I add to that? I'm gonna put out the berries buffer zone. It's got more frogs and stuff in it than any area in the entire lake.
it
So
does,
It's more than just fishing.
Right, because they find a cover there.
right.
And they are probably have food, they have shelter, they have what they need for that habitat.
Mhm.
So we planted this is at the Kentucky Horse Park in Lexington, Fayette County. And so we planted this with containerized shrubs, with bald and burlap tree, as well as some plugs along the edge. And sorry, it's got some kind of automatic thing. And then we use willow live stakes to stabilize the stream itself, right at the base of the stream and the bank. And so this was done deliberately. We had to use herbicide to kill the turf that was there, because otherwise it would outcompete what we were planting. And then we planted these other things, and we have probably in some places a 15 to 20 foot buffer. In other places, it's a little more narrow. But over time, it has started to look a little more wild and woolly than what it did. But you kind of have these options of appearance. Do you want it to look manicured? And that's okay, but don't put mulch in it. You might hear, because you're probably not often going to get, you're not going to get water high enough that it's going to wash your mulch away. But if you have a stream and you plant a buffer and you mulch it and it looks like this beautiful flower bed, which is what I was told I had to do at the worst part, we put it in and quickly all the mulch washed away. So just don't waste your resources on it. But there are different options and constraints based on what your goals are. The other thing you do have to remember is maintenance, and maintenance has to be done. It's not a put it in and walk away, because you have to manage for invasives. You might have to pick up trash out of it. There may be plants that come in out of the seed bank that you didn't really intend to be there and that you may not want. They may be undesirable. So what I want to show you now is an example of a homeowner association that I've been working with in Fayette County. They purchased an old golf course. Their golf course went defunct. And so their HOAs bought the golf course property to turn it into green space. And the neighbors are not at all in agreement as to what should happen on that green space, because these are folks who bought a home with the intent of living on a golf course. So you kind of know the mindset of maintenance related to a golf course. Lots of mowing, lots of fertilizer, lots of pesticide, because they're like, well, I'm managing turf that's like a 1/4 inch tall. I'm like, well, we're going to shift now over to green space. And this lady that's in the hat right here, man, she is a firecracker. And she calls me on a regular basis. Like, I made a mistake of giving her my cell number. And I'm like, dang it, Smithy. Again, Smithy. She's right now, I'm like, am I doing a workshop for her this fall? But so what she does, she is constantly educating her neighbors and friends about how they could transform their green space. And so they have ponds that they are trying to manage. They have areas that don't have a buffer. Everybody's property lines go down to the water. And so it's up to those individual homeowners to manage some of that. And then some of it they manage as a group. And these are pictures from there's several neighborhoods. It's a really big space. And so I've gone out several times to take a look. And I want you to tell me what's your reaction to these pictures? And honest, this is safe space. Just tell me what kind of, when you see that, does that look good? Does it look bad? Does it look, whatever?
It's eroding.
It's eroding, and that tree is gonna fall in really soon.
This one?
Yeah.
Yeah, that guy is probably not long for the landscape. What else?
Not that attractive.
Sorry, so some folks, some of the front row think, well, there's erosion issues, maybe not attractive. Anybody like how nicely manicured this one over here looks? It's okay. You don't have to raise your hand. You don't have to. Because like the house I grew up in, that's what we were doing. And I would argue because probably because I was a lazy teenager and I didn't want to get the weed eater down in the stream bed. But my mom hated snakes and wanted nothing to do with any habitat that might be created. And so, but this is eroded and it's problematic for the folks who own the homes adjacent. They have, because some of them have had to start putting retainer walls up. Some of them are scratching their heads and going, whoa, what are we going to do here? Because there's development that's coming in adjacent. It's going to create more runoff because they're paving more kind of upstream. And now we're getting the brunt of it. So what do we do? And so this is, that's up close. That's not a good thing when we talk about sedimentation. We often think about sediment leaving the landscape and being a water pollutant that's coming off of like an active construction site or maybe some ground that's been plowed or cultivated in some way, shape, or form. But the reality is that stream banks are a huge contributor of soil and sediment into our waterways. That's where a lot of the sediment's coming from, is erosion right here. And remember that image I showed you with the turf grass? There's not enough root system. These are some roots from this tree that are going, I mean, that tree is like holding on for dear life. But when we don't have any active vegetation right there to hold that soil right there, it's just going to erode away. And so again, this is kind of a shot of what that looked like. We were out in the fall. And there's their geese. They have a lot of geese problems too. Tall grass can deter geese. They don't feel safe there. They feel like predators could get them, so they're going to go somewhere else. So if you mow to the edge, the geese are going to be like, oh yeah, this is all good. I feel good here. And geese produce, I think, as much or more per body manure excrement than a dairy cow.
Yeah.
So you may as well just have a dairy cow out back and get the benefits from having a dairy cow as having this flock of geese. So I just want to bring this up because these folks are working together. It's not all puppies and rainbows for everybody, because there are folks that don't like the native look. There are folks that want a more manicured look, but they're slowly trying to build consensus in their community to get to places where they're like, okay, well, let's start around our ponds and let's have places where we have access, because a lot of folks, when we have water, when you live in a house like this and you have this in your backyard, don't you want to see it? I want to see it. So I understand not obstructing the view, but can we find a place where we have a little sitting area where we can see the water, but then we have other larger places where we're protecting the water using those vegetation and the buffers. Okay, so solutions: plant in the buffer zone, don't mow in the buffer zone. If you're confused about what that means, see rule number 1. This is kind of what it kind of can happen when you mow, is you're throwing the clippings over into the water, and those clippings have a lot of nitrogen, right? You'd be better off to bag them and put around your tomato plants and hope you can get a little nitrogen from there. Yes, yeah.
So I discovered I have a big stand of switchgrass on one side of my pond, which I think is really pretty.
Right.
And I mow it like once a year.
Sure. Yes, fine. To
But
remove the biomass.
I learned something. I'm thinking, you're a little fishy. Here's the fish clippings. I mean, the clippings, so I will go in one
compost,
direction.
yes,
and mow,
compost. Or
so it
you can
grows
mow
away.
it, yeah, and throw it up into it. Yeah, or you can clip them and compost it.
Oh, yeah, right.
Well, yeah, depending on how much you have.
Yes.
And switchgrass can spread a lot too. So it's good, but it also can spread. So keep that in mind too. But mowing, when we mow and we're throwing the clippings in, it leads to more nutrient in the water. Yes.
I was just curious if your perfect system is trees on the edge, nothing grows on the trees typically. So are you just backing out? You would need the other parts of that to back off.
Right. When you and when you're having So yes, so you're right. You shouldn't have bare soil under there though, if you're leaving leaves that will fall off of there, or you have a mixture of trees and shrubs. I mean, in this type of setting, a mixture of trees and shrubs would be great right up at the edge, because you'll have some understory and to protect the soil resources. Is that your question really? So you don't have runoff?
Well, let's just say
underneath
it's a
the tree?
pine tree, which is probably not a good choice, but nothing grows under a pine tree.
Right, but you've got cover on your soil. Tracy?
Aren't there some, one of the guys that you brought, doesn't it list some shade tolerant plants, native plants?
I think there are in the guides. So several of the things that I brought along have plant lists in them. So these are on the back table as well, and this one as well. Even though it says stream, backyard stream, the plant guide is what you're after. Some of them, yes, have some shade tolerant species that are listed. Yeah, so you know, if you go out into a natural wooded ecosystem, you don't just see bare soil under it, right? Like because we typically don't manage that. We don't rake leaves away and we leave the understory there. So you'll have some smaller things. It shouldn't just be there. I know under pine trees typically you just have, you have pine needles, but they're gonna protect the soil surface from erosion. But good question. Absolutely. And also a reminder to do a soil test to determine your fertilizer needs. This is my favorite little graphic of what you're actually doing sometimes when you're out with your fertilizer buggy. And I think time-wise I should stop. But I could talk about this stuff for days, but I'll be here a bit longer and I'll be here all morning. Am I okay? I'm not really, I think that's kind of the end. I have several more slides, but however, just a reminder that this is what we're trying to avoid, right? One other thing I would say is and this is some stuff that I work on a lot, is farmer-led watershed leadership, as well as just watershed leadership in general, working with homeowners, landowners. How can you be a leader in water-related issues? You've got Becca here, which is fantastic that you have her in the watershed. You're lucky because we don't have that in every watershed. You've got Tracy, who's fantastic in Oldham County. So utilizing your resources, but also, you know, learning more. And so these are examples of ways that you can be a leader, but, you know, you learn for yourself first and then start sharing that information or having conversations about it. Maybe hosting a ice cream social to come look at your stream buffer and explore your frogs, right? You know, somebody who's new who doesn't know. So having a field day, mentoring others, serving on a board. Yeah, I assume there's an HOA board or other boards. There's a conservation district board that's in Oldham County. And so that's one way. And then also helping Becca in participating in some of the watershed functions and activities that Curry Sport Watershed does. So again, and also of course leading by example. I'm going to stop with this. Just a reminder, this is something for all of us to think about. I have a 7-year-old, so I think about it a lot. Like, what am I doing and what am I leaving behind? I know a lot of you probably also have children and grandchildren that think about that too. So yes, ma'am.
How would you suggest dealing with the problem when all the things you just showed is going on in front of my house, but the contaminants are coming from upstream?
And that is a typical situation. So unfortunately, you're not alone. I guess I would go back to that getting more involved in organizations that are looking at things from a holistic perspective. I think that's a really nice example of how you can talk to Becca and figure out what's going on in the watershed. And through the efforts that she's working on, it's funded through Division of Water. And so she's got, and I have, as well as Tracy and Forrest too, you know, we at least know folks who know more than we do. And so figuring out where is the pollution coming from? Is there something that we can do as a group, as a whole? Is there, you know, something going on that's illegal that shouldn't be happening? Or is it just a lack of education? And can we kind of serve in those leadership roles to figure out a way to fix that? But it's unfortunately, yeah, we all live downstream, right? So we're gonna take what's coming, unless you're in the head of the holler, you're gonna be getting what's happening upstream here. And I have personal experience with that too, so it can be frustrating. So, yes.
Cattails, good, bad.
Oh.
They're not my favorite. They have a function, but the problem is how invasive they can be. Apparently you can eat them. So, yeah, we have a few nods.
If you're hungry.
If you're really hungry.
So kind of, I don't want to shut you
No,
off.
no, please.
And on the Q&A, what we were gonna do is allow Forrest to also go ahead and talk, and we'll have time for Q&A following that. Everybody who's here is gonna be here for a little while, so don't mean to squash it, but hold on just a little bit longer.
Okay, Forrest is up. Thank you.
Thanks, man.
Good news, Amanda's given most of my talk, so I don't really have to say all that. We'll see what we can do here. We had some projector issues earlier. I'm really afraid of screwing this thing up. All right, can y'all see this reasonably well? So the first thing we need to do when we have a pond or lake that we're looking to manage is that we know what it's being used for. And sometimes ponds are used for multiple purposes. This is just a few of them that I encountered. There's numerous uses for different ponds. And sometimes multiple purpose ponds can be difficult to manage. So especially if we're talking about altering the environment, if we're talking about adding chemicals of any kind to the pond, we're going to have to know what's going on out there, especially from an agency standpoint. We've got folks in the back that are professional plant control people, work with ponds, the overall ecology of ponds. They need to know this as well. So we also need to manage these bodies of water with the management priorities in mind. So the main objective might be flood control, might be aesthetics. It might just be in some of these housing developments, it just might be handling all the water runoff from the hard surfaces, the roofs, the parking lots. A lot of times these places are sold as waterfront views. Well, they're not waterfront views. Without that body of water out there to catch the water from all these hard surfaces, they wouldn't have gotten a permit and there wouldn't be a house there. So you have to be mindful as to why things are the way they are, and what these bodies of water are being managed for. So we'll get on that soapbox because that's a whole other talk. I've given it, but we're not going to give that here today. So steps to controlling algae, aquatic vegetation. It's nice that we have an example of an arm of a lake out here right now that has some vegetation in it. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. Some things we need to know. First and foremost, on this. First of all, we have to be able to identify the plant. Back there in that aluminum tray, there's some what I believe is Eurasian milfoil. Is that right, guys? Okay, got some agreement back there. I don't work with milfoils a lot because I don't see them in our smaller ponds and lakes. The kind of stuff that Tracy and other agents in the state call me about. But first of all, we have to know what we're doing. If we don't know what the plan is, we're done. And a lot of times I'll have people call it, I've got duckweed in my pond. Why do they call it duckweed? Because there's ducks in the pond and there's also a plant in the same environment. And so it's duckweed. Ducks will swim by it, therefore it's duckweed. Not necessarily so. The good news is most of our smaller ponds and lakes, this is not one of them, are probably an acre or less, and they have limited access. So most of the plants I see are native plants, probably one of a dozen or two types of plants. It's not hard to learn your plants, but again, you've got to know what you're talking about. I've already talked about pond uses. We've got to know that too. Are these ponds irrigational sources of irrigation water, drinking water for either humans or livestock? All these are possibilities throughout the state. So again, we've just got to know what we're doing. Physical nature of the pond. Almost all of our ponds that I'm going to be talking about, watershed ponds, similar to what Amanda was talking about. Water hits the rain, like last night, hits the watershed, goes into the pond. Not surprisingly, that pond water, that pond environment is going to reflect what's going on in the watershed. I have seen, not around here, but I have seen, believe me, not around here. I have seen wrecking yards in the watersheds of ponds. I can't imagine what's been in that pond. Just all kinds of fluids from cars, trucks, and that sort of thing. And lastly, we need to know a little bit about water chemistry, which is again, more than we need to get into here. Okay, so what do? We start with the construction of a pond. Almost all of our ponds in the state are man-made. I don't know that are hardly any natural. They're dammed up valleys, or they're excavated, or levee style ponds, whichever. This is key. If you want to encourage aquatic plant control, dig a real shallow pond, flood it, and all the plants, if you build it, they will come. The plants will come up from the bottom, and algae will be there. And this is in fact, anybody here belong to Ducks Unlimited? Oh, okay. What do we do when we make duck ponds, crawfish ponds? Take a shallow pond and plant all the plants in here that I'm basically going to tell you how to kill. So what we want to be control freaks about our ponds, but our ponds are built for different purposes. So if we want to build a duck or crawfish pond, we want a real shallow pond like this to encourage vegetation, the ducks to come in and feed on it. Same with crawfish. If we don't want this, if we want to swim, boat, and fish, probably best not to do that. So try to limit the shallow areas to 2.5 feet, 3 feet deep at a minimum around the edges. This will discourage some plant growth. Most plant algae growth starts on the perimeter of the pond and works its way towards the center of the pond. It's just the way it goes. And it's important to know that all ponds, as soon as you build them, they start filling in. They fill in with sediment, they fill in with organic matter, leaves, rotting plant material, et cetera, et cetera. What you do in the watershed reflects the life of that pond. So if the watershed is well maintained, well stabilized, which Amanda just got through talking to you about, these ponds can go maybe 100 years or more without renovation. We go out there and we abuse the watershed. We leave a lot of exposed areas. We have overgrazing, all these other things, unlimited construction. A pond will act as a sediment trap. Within a few years, it'll be real shallow like this, and it'll have to be scooped out, drained, and scooped out. So that's the life of a pond. We call that pond succession. So as soon as you start building that thing, it's going to fill up. It's just a question of how much life can we get out of a pond before it has to be renovated and basically cleaned out. So Amanda spoke about a lot of these things, so I'm going to certainly buffer strips, great talk there. So I'm going to skip all that. But again, you have to be mindful of what's going on in the watershed. I understand that sometimes there's this 80-acre pond out here, 80-acre lake, 50 people around it. Ruling by committee is hard. Amanda and I are both on committees. We know how that works. I mean, it's hard to get something done. But most of the people have to be in agreement as to what to do in the watershed and how to try to preserve it. It is especially difficult, as it came up before. We are all downstream, as Amanda said. What happens when you are inheriting water that comes from other properties that you have no control over? This is tough. I mean, there's no easy answers to that. Okay, a little bit about just what fuels all this. I just threw this up here to show you how little phosphorus it takes to create what we would call a eutrophic, or that's a nice word for kind of a polluted situation, 1/10 of a milligram per liter. This phosphorus is the driving force behind algae and plant production in fresh water. Now, salt water, nitrogen, and phosphorus and other ingredients play a bigger picture. It's mostly phosphorus in fresh water. Your soils up here in the bluegrass are rich in phosphorus and other nutrients. You've got well buffered soils here, something that we don't enjoy in the parts of the state like where I live, out in the Jackson Purchase area of West Kentucky. So this is both a blessing and a curse. You're going to get a lot of algae up here. You're going to get a lot of plant growth because you've got productive soils. Your alkalinities, your hardnesses of the water is what makes us good country to make whiskey. It's what gives you bluegrass, horses, all that other stuff associated with this part of the state. But it also gives you pretty exuberant pond growth, algae and plants. That just comes with the territory. So remember this: if you can control your fertilizers, get your soil tested, this sort of thing, limit the amount of phosphorus going into the pond, you will be that much better off. Some of you I know, probably about my age, remember the 70s when they took the phosphates out of detergents. They remember that? That's why. Good ingredient in detergent, stripping grease, all this, that, and the other, but disastrous on water quality.
Can
So
you get a water test at the extension office?
I can do some limited testing. Available phosphorus, we've got guys, Aquatic Control, Jones Fish Farm back there. They're better set up to do that. I use Waters Lab out of Owensboro, so you can get available phosphorus testing. The next thing you're gonna have to decide though is get a test, what to do about it. A bigger question. If you have a 1 acre pond and you own the watershed around it, that's a much easier issue to address than when you've got 50 houses with lawns and water coming in from some other off property source. Good pictures go a long way to identifying plants. You can see the little pan back there, a little dish pan stealing somebody's casserole bowl like happened here. Yeah, some of the stuff I put in household glassware is not always appreciated. I'm lucky, my wife's a biologist, but I can assure you the homemakers of the extension offices are not, as we found out. But anyway, good pictures go a long way. We can email, we can text. And Tracy and I, a lot of us probably can do 90% of the identifications by phone, on our cell phones or by computer. It's really gotten easy. I used to, 20, 30 years ago, I used to get these stinking masses of plants in the mail. I don't know how the postmaster didn't come and shoot. And I'd have to open up the stuff outside. I mean, it was that bad because if it sits in a mailbox when it's 100 degrees out for a week, you've got this pulp that you're, it's really almost a hazardous substance by that point. So we can go a long way, but we have to know what we're talking about. We have to know what we're doing before we start talking about chemicals or anything else. So you can see the little plants floating around in the pond out there. What really helps with this, I don't want to belabor this, is it lets the plants spread out a little bit and makes it a whole lot easier to identify. Now, a lot of times what I'll do is somebody go out there with a pitchfork, jam it in there, get a ball of weed, hold it up to the sun, take a picture. What's this? Doesn't work out well. It's a mess is what it is. So anyway, all right, so the way we identify, I don't know if you can see this back there, we just put these plants into an artificial classification. Here's some cattails over here that were mentioned. These are emergent plants. They have roots in the bottom, but a lot of the plant, at least some of the plant, is sticking up over the water. Floating plants, duckweeds, watermeal is a good example of that. Submersed plants. This is like the milfoils we see out here in this arm of the lake. Mostly submerged. Most of the plant is underwater. And we also have some phytoplankton, some just planktonic plankton, tiny plants that pretty much run our lives. We'll talk about that here in a minute. But you can't get rid of them. All you can do is try to persuade them maybe to behave a little bit on a good day. We'll talk about that here in a minute. So these are artificial classifications of plants. Somebody was good enough to bring these fact sheets. This is the way the plants are grouped artificially so that we can go about trying to control them and identify them just by their overall life ecology. How do they interact in the environment? Where are they in terms of their growth pattern? One of the big things we run into, Amanda can speak better to this than I can, but when I see these bathing beauties out in the pond, it's pretty much over. These guys do all kinds of things in that water that you can imagine. They tranquil the banks. They create all kinds of nutrients in here, and I will rival these to geese. These are worse. When you're talking about a pond pollution device, this is a good one. Here again, this pond probably costs thousands and thousands of dollars to construct. What are we doing? We're shortening the life of it by letting the cattle trample around in it, pollute the water. This isn't good for the cows either, what I'm told. I'm not a cattle specialist. And it's certainly not good for the pond or anything in it. So here again, we have to be our own control freaks. If you fence off a pond like this, put either a water structure in the pond like this where they can wade in limited access areas, or one on the other side of the dam to where they can gain water without trampling around in the pond, loafing as people call it. They have all kinds of terms for this. You're that much better off, and so is your pond. So without getting into that, aeration and diffusion devices, destratification devices, aeration is a really important tool. Destratification is for deeper ponds. Let's talk about 10 feet deep or more, a bubbling top system that comes up from the bottom. Again, we have folks in the back of the room that sell these types of systems. They also install them and maintain. I have a publication that I put together on this subject. Generally, your aerator is for more shallow water areas. I would say 8 to 10 feet, something like that. Get much beyond that, you're talking about the stratification systems. Diffused air pumps on land that force air through grids on the bottom, slowly turn the water over in the pond. Generally, you want about 1 rotation of the water in the pond, the whole volume, over a 24-hour period, something like that. Think of it as a ceiling fan for your pond. This thing is on the bottom of the pond, it's slowly mixing. This prevents destratification, which can help prevent fish kills. Again, another talk. Also, good to help eliminate quiescent waters. We have out here, this is a perfect marsh. We've got shallow water, we've got transparency to the bottom, and we've got, it's nice and quiet. Our plants like that. They like that environment. Algae likes that. Duckweeds, everything will move in there. It's good nursery habitat for small fish. So it's important to have this, and it's important to have some growth in there. But we get too much, and it's like a jungle, and you can't swim, you can't get your boat in and out, and that's when people complain. And from what I understand, it was like that until I got here. That's always how that works. It's like, I'm like the appliance repairman. It didn't work until I showed up. So this is a tool. It's an expensive one. These things are not cheap. In this situation, we'd have to decide who's going to pay for the power that runs this gizmo. But some of these things can be approached. The electricity has to be paid for, the unit has to be paid for, the installation has to be paid for, and the thing has to be maintained. So like everything else in this world, it's not cheap, but it will help in vegetation control, and it will help in the overall ecology of your pond. You want some of this growth out here. It's like Amanda said. We don't want to denuke the pond of all vegetation. We're not going to go out here and nuke the thing. We want some habitat out there, but we still want to have habitat where we can get our boats in and out, where we can swim and have a certain degree of aesthetic. So it's a balancing act. Think of management and not eradication. Eradication. Picking up my own words here. Anyway, methods of control. Some of you have probably tried this. Breaking, pulling, flushing, swearing, all this, hurting your back. It works to some degree in small ponds if the growth has started. The time to do this is not mid-July when you've got acres and acres of this out there. You're going to hurt yourself, get heat stroke, and you're going to get discouraged. This stuff can really do some serious reproduction during the hot summer months, such as we've had. So it's there, but it's a limited tool. Mostly we take a multi-pronged approach. We'll try herbicides. We'll try a number of different tactics to try to get this stuff to where we can manage it. Dyes are pretty much limited to our physical things, and I'll talk about that. Fertilization, I don't generally recommend that. If you're running a sportsman club, if you're a real fishing enthusiast, with a lot of hemming and hawing, I'll make a fertilization recommendation for you, but it's not for most people. It's expensive and you got to stay on it. You got to think of our ponds and lakes as your garden. This is not one of these things you go out there and throw something in there and ignore it for a year. It takes about as much work to manage a pond and lake as it would your vegetable garden. What happens if you don't weed your vegetable garden for a month? You all know the answer to that. You've got nothing in there but weeds. Think of a pond the same way. Just because it's a body of water, far less productive one than your vegetable garden, it still needs maintenance. It just does. That's just the nature of things. Biological controls, limited to grass carp. We'll talk about that here in a minute. Then chemical, algicides, liquid and granular, herbicides, a lot of which are discussed on this sheet. We've only got about 16 or 17 registered herbicides that we can use in the aquatic environment versus probably 1,000 or more that you can use on land, terrestrial environments. Almost all of these have been devised or developed from terrestrial herbicide applications. So there's not a lot of money in these things. They're expensive, I know that. The good news is, though, they've been formulated not to do a lot of damage in aquatic situations. You can take the same fertilizer, such as glyphosate, for instance, a Roundup type product, spray it out here on some cattails or something, but the surfactants in it are different. We want different surfactants for use in the water. We don't want We don't want detergent-based surfactants because those can be injurious to aquatic life. So the chemical may be the same, but the surfactants and other ingredients are different. So that's an important thing. That's an important thing to get under your hat. Just because you have it in the barn or the shed doesn't mean you ought to use it out on the pond because you're using it on your fence rows. Different environment, different chemical. Physical controls. This is mostly dye. Everybody sells this stuff. Farm supply stores sell it. These folks sell it back here. Get in all different colors: reds, blues, blacks, greens. This stuff is basically inert chemically. It's a food color. I think some people think it looks pretty. I don't particularly care for it, but you know, to each their own. You see this in a lot of fountains, municipal waters, golf courses, etc. The idea is that this is supposed to block out sunlight and keep stuff from growing up on the bottom, whether it's vascular plants or algae. How well this works, I don't know. I've got a neighbor that puts it in thick enough in a tiny pond to where it looks like it's covered with antifreeze, filled up with antifreeze. Yeah, nothing, no sunlight penetrates. He's got a transparency of about 2 inches in there. It looks like somebody's filled up his pond with Presto. So if you like the way that looks, I don't really care for it. That's what this is, but it really, it's up to you whether you like the way this looks. Problem with this stuff is it's not real effective in shallow waters. 1-2 feet of water where the plant algae problems start in the first place. This stuff isn't real effective given the normal recommendations as to how they dose this. So that's a limiting factor there. I grew up in the 70s when people used to dye their toilet water blue for some odd reason. And it kind of reminds me of my aunt's house anyway, but you know, don't let that discourage you. It really doesn't hurt. I don't know how much it helps. If you like the way it looks, it's good. Also, if you're in a watershed pond, you have a watershed pond, you get a big rain, it can wash over the dam and be gone in a day. So
You can watch it go over the dam. It doesn't last more than 2 hours.
yeah, well, you get a good enough rain, that's the case, yeah. Problem with watershed ponds is you can't turn the water on when you need it. You can't turn it off in the wintertime when water's just tearing through there. So that's the nature of what we have to work with. But anyway, that's my spiel on dyes. If you like it, use it. I would recommend mid to late summer, most summers, maybe not this one, to use this just so you get some retention time in the pond. Retention time is a big deal for a lot of the herbicides I'm going to talk about later. So retention time is a thing. And if you put this stuff out, yesterday afternoon and yesterday, I drove through some incredible rain getting here from West Kentucky. A lot of these things were washed out in a day's time. All right, very quickly, algae. We've got planktonic algae. These are the ones you can't see, but these run the show. These are your blue-greens, or better, more accurately, cyanobacteria. You've got green algae. These things are really important. We'll talk about that. Glenas. Down here, I probably get more complaints about filamentous algae than anything. That's the hairy mat stuff that floats around. It grows up from the bottom, almost makes like a mushroom cloud of algae. Floats around the pond. People complain about this all the time. It's nasty. You don't want to swim in it, et cetera, et cetera. Kind of looks like a hairy mass, for lack of a better term. Branched algae, we've seen this. Cara, some Nightella, especially up in this area. I think Doug and I went out and found some Nightella, not too far from here, was it?
It was in Jefferson County.
Yeah, Jefferson County. So anyway, these things are around. These are the types of algae. Algae are, you got to have algae. This is my feeling on algae. Algae pretty much runs the show. Without algae in our oceans, we'd be in a lot of trouble. It's estimated, and I don't know who made the estimate, produces about 40 to 50% of our oxygen that we breathe. It's in our ponds and lakes. It's in glaciers. Algae is everywhere. It reproduces by spores. Everybody knows if you leave a glass of water on your table in the summer for about a week outside, you're going to get algae in it. It's only going to take a few days. So there's no getting away from algae. Or what? There's a thinking man. Yeah. An expensive algicide, but it supports the local economy. I like that strategy. I'll tell my wife that. Gets on me about empty bottles of bourbon. But anyway, Filamentous algae, I mentioned this stuff, probably the number one complaint I get. Copper sulfate has been around since the 1950s. You can treat this stuff. All the algicides are pretty much contact in nature. You've got to get under the plant. You've got to get on top of it and get as much material sprayed here to kill it as possible. Now, if you do this in the hot weather like we've had, you're probably going to deplete the oxygen. You want to get on this early in the spring, as soon as these things start to develop, as soon as your water temperature is up, probably close to 60 degrees, get a jump on it. Do not wait till this time of year to start addressing your aquatic plant.
Even if you can't see it, I mean, is it there?
Well, I mean, you've got to, often it is, because the growth will start on the bottom and it'll come up. I don't want to say go out there and prophylactically treat if you see no problem, but you got to get it, the chemicals are not very reactive when water temperatures get too cool, probably much below 55, 60 degrees, somewhere in there. But on the other hand, you don't want to wait till midsummer to get on this, because the horse has pretty much left the barn by now. It's hard to turn these types of conditions around and kill this stuff off without causing oxygen depletion and killing fish. If you don't care about your fish, there's no fish in the body of water, that's a different story. Then you can go ahead. Most people have fish and most people care about them. So from that standpoint, there's many other algicides here that we can also use as alternative. Copper sulfate is available just about everywhere. And with some reservations, you can use it pretty freely up here. You don't have low alkalinity, low hardness water like I do out where I live. So here the water's probably hard enough to where you're going to have to be careful not to use enough to get efficacy in the treatment. But this body of water right here, this is about a foot deep. The sunlight's blaring right through to the bottom here. This is going to be an endless struggle, a losing battle. You know, you're trying to treat this little arm of the lake here. Normally, where the water comes in at the front of the lake and the sediments deposited there, these areas are going to shallow up first as the sediment, organic matter deposits. As it works its way towards the dam, in time, the lake will become shallow and need to be renovated. Chara is one of the branched algae we see quite a bit of this in West Kentucky. This is almost like a tumbleweed in your pond. It has no roots. Nitella is the same sort of thing. I don't know how much of that you have here. A lot of Chara? Okay, yeah.
Is it coontail?
Chara looks like coontail, but coontail is a vascular plant where Chara is actually a branched algae. It's fairly common out where I am.
Is it bad?
You know, none of this stuff is bad until you can't get in your pond. I mean, and again, going back to the duck thing, if you have a pond full of duckweed or not duckweed, of pondweed, for instance, as forage for ducks, that's great. But if you're wanting to swim and boat and stuff, your pond full of pondweed is going to be a problem. So again, back to management objectives. What are we trying to do here? So it's kind of in the eye of the beholder, you know, as to what's bad and what isn't. I have some people that have wildlife ponds, I call them. Those trees all are Amanda who love these. They've got that nice black tannin stained water from all the leaves falling in the tree, and they want to see the animals come down. And they have snakes and they have raccoons and everything else come right to the water's edge. That's what they want. I have other people that would leave the state if they thought they had a snake anywhere on their property. And those are the ones that have the well manicured lawns all the way around. So again, it's you know, you build it and they will come. If you want to attract wildlife, just see that pile of brush out there on the side of this pond, but just leave it there. Make a bunch of them. You'll have all kinds of stuff, creepy crawlies, I like the term, as Amanda mentioned, and you'll attract wildlife. So you can do these things with a pond. It's just a question of what you want. Don't leave a bunch of junk out there, boards, old boats, and other stuff on the shore and expect no wildlife to come in. That's not going to work because you're creating habitat. Anyway, getting off on a tangent here. Chemicals. First, read the restrictions, read the label. This can get you in trouble. You'll need most of the chemicals, all the chemicals I'm going to mention here do not require an applicator's permit. Most of this stuff can be bought without an applicator's license, private or commercial. So that's important. But you've got still, if you use the stuff in an off-label way, you can get in trouble and can do bad things to the environment. So you won't do that. Another thing is, do you have the equipment to do this? Most of the ponds I work with are small, quarter acre, an acre, something like this. This is 80 some odd acres out here. This is a big undertaking to work in a pond like this, even if you're only trying to treat and or remove weeds from, let's say, 10, 20% of it. Folks in the back have boats and stuff to do this. They have the knowledge. They have metered applicator devices, not the kind of stuff that you will see on farm, little tank sprayers, backpack sprayers. You know, this is like trying to put out a forest fire with a garden hose. In some of these situations, you really need professionals, if nothing else, to come in and get the situation under control for you. Then maybe, just maybe, you might be able to maintain the control afterwards as a follow-up. But to get a situation under control is pretty difficult. I get a lot of folks that bought farmland, have moved in from other places. Ponds have been left for 10, 20 years. Needless to say, it's a mess, as the whole farm is. So you've got to be realistic about what you can do, what your resources are, and what your know-how is. Copper sulfate, as I mentioned, been around for years and years. Read the label. Do not just take the crystals. In most cases, the crystals are too coarse. Do not just throw them in there and broadcast. You want to dilute these down and spray them. Spray, make sure you can get as much of the mat area covered. You're going to get that bluish, greenish colored water, and you will, and that will give you some good coverage. It won't work on all forms of algae, but it's a pretty good standby and worth trying. If for no other reason, it's relatively inexpensive. Chelated coppers are sold. These are supposedly more effective, more longer lasting, environmentally friendly. They are more expensive, and you can try these as well. This is a higher end type of copper sulfate, but these things are around, again, available at most farm supply stores. This particular publication will explain a lot of this. We can get you copies of this if you'd like one. I've got a few with me. Unfortunately, I don't have too many, but in any event, we can help you with that. Duckweed, also pretty good on filamentous algae, not so good on planktonic algae. I wouldn't recommend it for that. Duckweed's been around for years and years. It is a very non-selective herbicide / algicide. I recommend this stuff a fair amount for spot treatments just because it's available and relatively inexpensive to buy. This stuff, you're basically hydroxide based formulations. These are good on blue-green algae or cyanobacteria. That's what they're developed for. Also an alternative to copper products. If you have an ornamental pond, anybody have an ornamental pond here?
What do you mean by an ornamental?
Koi pond, little pond, would easily fit in this room. You have one? Okay, this is more for you because it won't harm your plants and it won't harm koi and other fish that are sensitive to copper products. And you've got a relatively small treatment area, so the expense is not going to be a factor. Once you get into treating acres and acres of water with this stuff, the expense will go up quite a bit. Okay, so algae, real quickly. Can't hardly see this. We want green algae out here. Green algae is the good stuff. Cyanobacteria is the bad stuff. Unfortunately, cyanobacteria, your blue greens, oftentimes I describe it as the stuff that looks like a skim on top of the water. It looks like Kelly green paint, John Deere color paint. This stuff can actually outcompete it because it has the ability to adjust itself, regulate itself in the water column. It can shade out the more desirable algae. We see this midsummer, late summer, when the weather gets real hot and dry like it has been, at least out where I am. And right now we see it. We've seen it probably up since June on. We're not going to get rid of it till the fall. Cyanobacteria, as Amanda mentioned, can be toxic. It's a real difficult stuff to work with. Our catfish ponds in West Kentucky generate this stuff like nobody's business. Our ponds look like they're filled with antifreeze from cyanobacteria. It's not a desirable thing to have around. It's not real productive algae. We much prefer green algae. But nevertheless, this is what we have. You can see some cyanobacteria in this picture right here. It comes in all forms. Some of it is toxic. Some of it isn't. Sometimes the toxic forms are toxic and they're not. Right now, we don't have great ways of testing this in the field. We've got some folks back here, their labs will do this, but the testing between shipping and all this other can take days to get a result back. It's just a snapshot in time. This material can go toxic in a matter of a day or two, and in which case your test from last week is really not going to help you this.
Is it slimy and you can kind of wriggly it?
It kind of, it's almost, the dead and dying stuff forms a film on the top, but it's throughout the water column.
Okay.
This is a three-dimensional problem. This is just not on the surface. You're just seeing what's on the surface. But yeah, it can be bluish green, you know, all these kinds of things. It can have a number of different colors, or it can be colorless. There's some that are colorless. You don't know they're out there. It can give off odors. In some cases, it's toxic to vertebrates, fish on up. Sometimes, you know, it really can be problematic. And there's a number of different toxins, neurotoxins, hepatotoxins. It can really be problematic stuff. We're struggling, at least Amanda and I, as to what to do about this on the education front. Should say Amanda and I are educators, as is Tracy. We're not regulatory. We don't have certified labs. Some of those folks in the back do. We are just sort of educators. So we're kind of in a hard place to recommend as to what people do about this. Staying away is a great idea, but in West Kentucky, you'd have to stay away from your pond for 3 months. You can treat it, but then you're killing the stuff, rupturing the cells, and possibly releasing even more toxins than would be in the first place. So it's a hard problem to address. The Galena blooms, these are a little more spectacular. These can be orange, they can be red. These cells have pigments in them, carotenoid pigments, and they're quite impressive. People get excited when their ponds turn blood red like this. And they tend to call Tracy and other folks. It's not long for my phone rings too. So again, some of these can be toxic. Some of them are harmless. But when people wake up and they see something like this out there, they're pretty sure some aliens have invaded their pond or something. So you'll see this. I get a dozen calls about this every summer. All right, vascular plant control. Oh, here's some nice water lilies. Here's that splash of color you were talking about. Okay, now for your splash of color with regard to water lilies, I like water lilies. They're beautiful. What I would recommend you do is take a picture of someone else's water. Put it in your living room and don't put them in your pond. Because these things, I mean, everybody loves these. Oh, sorry. Everybody loves these beautiful flowers right here. But the problem is these turn into seeds. These seeds can last in a drip. If you take these seeds out of this plant, put them in a desk drawer, you can give them to your great grandchildren, throw them out in a pond, and they'll probably germinate. They're very tough. A lot of these plants I'm going to talk about have what we call a circumpolar distribution. They have tough, waxy leaves. They're hard to treat. And they spread also by runners or tubers, whatever you want to call them, underneath the mud. So they kind of look, envision Christmas lights under your pond. And you've got these stalks with leaves coming up and flowers. So again, you can buy these things right next to my office, ironically, for about $25 a piece. Put them out in your pond, and within a few years, you can have an acre of them. All this stuff is great if we had just a little bit, or enough to be aesthetically pleasing. But when you have a standing acre of nothing but pond, lily pads, it's a problem. So biological control, grass carp. I notice there's a fact sheet about these in the back. A good control method for smaller ponds and lakes. The bigger the lake, the harder the situation will be to control. These things get big in a hurry. That's one of their downsides. And when they get bigger, after a few years, they kind of get fat and lazy, like some of us, and they don't really work that hard anymore. So you need the younger fish to really do a lot of the work. Getting the big fish out can be a job. These are powerful fish. They could do a lot of damage if you have one in the net. Just trust me on that. These are some of the strongest fish I've handled, and I've been in this business a long time. On the other side of it, if you have bass out there, you want to stock these fish at about 10 inches in length or larger. They're great bass food, and they're expensive. Our grass carp are triploids. They have an extra set of chromosomes, and that is so they can't reproduce in our small bodies of water. Yes.
Will they eat the milfoil?
They will eat some of the smaller, the softer stem vegetation. Where are they with milfoils, guys? Good, bad, and different?
Okay.
Any of your softer stem vascular plant material, your branched algae is easily to digest. Think of that. They'll eat. Now, they're not going to do much about your cattails or your water shield or tougher plants. So although they're sold sometimes as a silver bullet, they are not. But they will work in some circumstances. And you have to stock quite a few of them. Then getting the big old fat lazy ones out can be a problem unless you're a bow hunter. The good news is they're really susceptible to low dissolved oxygen. So if your pond gets a DO deficiency in it, dissolved oxygen deficiency, let's say about 3 or 2, the grass carp, the big grass carp, about the first thing to come up. So they're somewhat self-limiting in that way, but otherwise they get to be 20, 30 pounds in a pond in fairly short order. What everybody has a different opinion. This is an art, not a science. It's how to stock these things. We don't, if we want to stock them out here, we would not stock it based on 80 acres. We would stock it based on the amount of acres that has the problem. So let's say only 15 acres has the problem of milfoil or something else out here that grass carp will eat. We'll stock on the basis of 15 acres, not put 80 acres worth of grass carp. So that's important. It's also important to your wallet. These triploids are fairly expensive, $10, $15 a piece.
Forrest, why don't you want the grass carp that you reproduce?
Um,
Not smaller ones?
Yeah, you can get into a situation where you've got populations out of control, a lot like what we have in our big rivers out here.
We had that here about 15 years ago. So they had big people in the carp control.
Yeah, we want to be kind of control freaks in our public or in our private lakes and ponds. This is the problem with our public waters, is that basically everyone has access. Try as we might, there's a few bad players out there that either intentionally or accidentally stock stuff in there we don't want. So limiting the reproduction on things like this is important.
I have carrot 3 months out of the year. One of the quite grow good triploid carp survive.
Yes, yeah, they're temperate fish. They do quite well in our temperate rivers. They're also the highest dollar of the Asian carps in terms of marketing them for food. So anyway, they're the best eating of them, supposedly. This is just so this is what grass carp will eat, the soft stem material, kind of like what you see in that pan back there. Don't expect them to eat lotus, water lilies, this type of stuff.
They don't eat the algae and stuff like that.
They'll eat a little algae, but they won't control it. Duckweed's the same way. They'll eat some of it, but the reproductive capability of these fish are so great. I mean, these plants are so great that they can't keep up with it. The small grass carp will eat filamentous algae. Problem is, so will the bass will eat small grass carp. This is like feeding your bass steak every night. So expense-wise, you don't want to do this. Okay, quickly, shoreline and emergent vegetation. This stuff's pretty straightforward. Again, I recommend glyphosate. A lot of times there are other chemicals you can use in here. Glyphosate, an aquatic registered glyphosate with a non-ionic surfactant. It's not injurious to plant, marine life. Aquatic life is what I'd go with. Mazapure, some other active ingredient here you can use. Get these. Amanda says, and she's right. I like cattails, but a few patches of them here and there. Eventually, these things will form a ring around your pond, and you'll need a machete to access your pond. Now, most people don't want that. So again, you can get some growth around in little clumps and stuff, but don't think that you're not going to have to go out there, either weed whack, pull, spray, do something. These things are not going to behave themselves. They will tend to overpopulate. Just like your garden, you're going to have to go out there and manage this. Also, these plants have tubers underground. These are the starchy kind of root systems that Amanda said you can eat. I have not tried this. Apparently the Native Americans did, and I think a lot of this has to do with just how hungry you might be. Up here, you see these, you see these seeds on these seed heads right here. These things will blow by the wind. Everybody's seen them. And they'll go from your pond to the neighbor's pond. As soon as you build a pond, these things will show up. Little stalks at first. If you don't want them there, pull them out then. Because you can pull all you want on these things, and all you're gonna do is break off the fronds and the leaves. You're gonna need a track hoe or something to get out a good stand of these types of plants like that.
Will the glyphosate actually kill the whole root?
These are translocated herbicides, so yes, you spray it on this green growth, not that brown straw colored growth that you'll see in the fall here. It'll translocate through the leaf system down into the roots.
So it has to have the surfactant.
The surfactants, a lot of these plants have waxy, kind of a cuticle almost on them, a covering. You need it as a sticker and a penetrant. These are tough plants. I mean, these are not your garden variety weeds. And a lot of times it will take multiple applications to kill out a big stand of this. So you got to be patient with this. But most importantly, let a little growth grow where you want it to, but don't let something get out of control on you. In a few years, a pond shoreline can get out of control. This is also true of willows. Not shortly after you build your new pond, you're going to have willows sprouting up. Again, wind-borne seeds. Birds will transport seeds to some degree. You build it and they will come. I promise you. Turtles, everything comes into your pond once you build it. You've built habitat. This stuff will migrate either by wind or by foot, or sometimes by 5-gallon bucket. And that's a problem too. Water primrose, another splash of color.
What's really thinking on the edge?
Oh, the edge. This is kind of the edge going out into the water. Yeah. Water primrose, this is an ivy-like vine, kind of a succulent reddish vine. It gets this little, I'm not a botanist, but I call it like a little buttercup flower on here. Really the only thing like it. Again, glyphosate will work on this, but glyphosate will only work on dry plant material. Once glyphosate hits the water, it's gone. It's useless. So you can spray a plant like this on the dry foliage here, a foliar application, but you can't expect any efficacy once that chemical hits the water. It's done.
So that's not part of your, included as part of your buffer zone.
No.
I had a catfish farmer experiment with this. This stuff will go 20 feet out from the bank. And they were using it to prevent wave erosion on our big flat, almost like a log boom. Well, it was, the singing crew wasn't nearly as appreciative of this stuff as, because, and you know, something like this here again, it's habitat. Water snakes love this stuff. So in the summer, you got this is like a hotel for water snakes and everything else in here. And when you're out there in a pond dressed pretty much like I am, it's too hot to wear waders in these conditions. The farm crew had a little more to say about that idea than perhaps the owner did. But anyway, water primrose, I don't know if these are good pollinating plants or not. But, they get lots of flowers. Again, this is off patent. A lot of these chemicals are. You can buy this stuff in farm supply stores. Get the Aquatic registered stuff. These folks in the back, Jones Fish Hatchery, Aquatic Control, Doug, these folks all can get you this stuff if you need it.
So not Roundup.
No, it's glyphosate. I'm talking active ingredient here. Glyphosate is the actual active ingredient. A rodeo here is the Monsanto equivalent of Roundup.
Okay,
So they're two different colors. They're registered different.
but it is okay to use Roundup?
I would not.
Okay.
It's illegal.
Rodeo works pretty good, but it's extreme.
Yes, it's expensive. You can go and buy other off brands that aren't nearly as expensive. I would look for something that's pretty concentrated. Yes.
Sorry, finish your thought because I'm gonna change gears.
Okay.
You're gonna.
I gotta stop.
Okay, so Jim has been watching the weather and he said that if we would maybe want to hurry and get to the Q&A if we can. I don't want to stop you on that, but if we're gonna do lakefront, we might want to get there by noon.
Okay, give me about 5 minutes and I'll hurry this along. Okay, surfactant. Again, non-ionic surfactants, there's all kinds of different surfactants. We don't want detergent-based surfactants going in the water. Plain and simple. Water lilies, I've already covered this. These are tough plants to control. Again, I go with 2,4-D granular. You can try some multiple applications of glyphosate, but there has to be enough dry plant growth to treat. Here's what a granular 2,4-D looks like. It does a pretty good job. You spread it, it gets into the root system, and kills the plants from the roots on up. This is parrot feather or right here, a burn down we did a while back. And you can see the before and after effects right here. This is an invasive plant that we don't really want to have around. Submerged and floating plants, or I mean submerged plants, again, pond weeds like right here, there are all kinds of different kinds. Triploid grass carp will eat this stuff. It is quite easily digested. Diquats and other contact herbicides, Endothol will work. Floridone will also work. Just different types of pond weeds. We get a lot of complaints about this. This is excellent waterfowl forage, by the way. So if you want waterfowl, you'll be out there planting stuff. This stuff. Now, curly leaf, this is an exotic. We don't want this. I've seen probably more curly leaf this year than I have just about any other. It's even making its way into the southern part of our state. Pond naiads, these are also like pond weeds, very hard to tell apart. These have opposite leaving instead of alternate leaving leaf patterns. That's the way you tell these. Same sort of herbicides will control these. Again, knowing what your plant is and working with these particular chemicals will help you. Aquat will work on this stuff.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
Is there a better time to treat? Just like this milfoil
Yes.
out here, when it comes up, it then flowers and makes just a mat across the shallow areas.
I would defer to these guys back here have a lot more experience treating milfoil than I do, and we'll get to that during the Q&A.
Okay.
Some of this stuff you want to, especially if you're using translocated systemic herbicides, you actually want to get while the plant is growing. So June, the new growth, because you want it to take it down into the root structures. So you want to get this stuff in its growth stage, not its senescence phase, like in the fall. General rule of thumb with treatments. This is just a burn back from Diquat on spike rush. Aquathol is another one out there. It has both systemic and contact herbicides. I don't use this stuff a lot, but a lot of other people do. Aquathol is the one to use for vascular plants. Duckweeds, very hard to control. There's a few chemicals out there. Generally, I recommend Diquat for this stuff. It can populate very quickly. What you want to do with duckweeds is try to limit the source of nutrient coming in. This stuff has water roots. It will take the nutrients right out of the water, and it's hard to control. So if you can control the phosphorus, much lesser degree nitrites coming into the water, you're that much further ahead. This stuff will be really problematic otherwise. You can reproduce it very quickly.
Can you spray it this time of year too?
Yeah, you can spray it, or you can do an in-pond treatment. You really want to do an in-pond treatment because there's plants down below. This is what you see. This is just sort of the two-dimensional approach, but it's a three-dimensional problem. Watermeal, arguably our hardest plant to control. It kind of related to duckweeds, and often you'll see it with duckweeds. There's really only a few chemicals that are effective on this. This is a situation in which there is a contact out there, but I would probably go with the longer-term systemic herbicides if I could. This is probably hands down our most difficult aquatic plant to treat. Sonar, this stuff, $1,800 a gallon, $2,000 a gallon. More than that. These are old prices. I don't know what it's gone up to, but it's very expensive. Whole pond treatments, again, much of it requires a 30-day retention period in the pond. So there are some ones you can spot treat with. I don't know how many different variants of sonar there are out there. It's hard to keep track of them all, but it is expensive.
How many dollars an acre?
Ask them. That's a good Q&A question. Not a good question for right now. It's the good term. You get some pretty good long-term control. That's a good. And there's also, unless you're irrigating either turf or crops, it's a good, relatively environmentally friendly product to use. Clipper is a flumioxazin is a chemical you can use as a contact, and this will also take down things like duckweeds and waterweed. All this stuff is pretty expensive, has restrictions, so know what you're doing, know what your plan is. I had a guy call me up last night in the hotel saying he had an algae problem. Well, I said, take a picture of it. Well, he did. It was a duckweed problem, wasn't algae. Completely different animal. Yes, they're green, and yes, they float on the pond, but that's where the similarities are. So Anyway, we've got all kinds of websites, information. We have it. Tracy has it. Folks in the back have it. There's a lot of information out there, so you're not by yourself on this. We've got some good identification websites right there. And that's it.
Yeah.
Before we get hit by lightning, I guess we're going to run out to the pond edge.
So this is an overview, but excuse me. So the objective here is to try to get you guys resources and answers to your specific problems. So what we're going to do here is have Amanda and Forrest come up and do Q&A because they both have information. I would love to have the vendors come up, but we don't have time for that. So my recommendation is that after we break up, there's going to be a session. After Q&A, we're going to do a drawing. Then we're going to go down and have people available down at the pond or on these picnic tables or in here to discuss your problem. So if you got a question, butthole one of you guys. If you got a pond nearby, you may want to take them out for lunch. But they're here to help you solve your problems. One of the things I want to ask is this worth doing again? Do you think it may be-
Yes. Thank you.
Okay.
Well,
Well,
some people might not have a raffle ticket or might
Yeah.
not sign in.
so if you need a raffle ticket for the 1 year free pond boss meeting, you can have a ticket. In the meantime, we'll start the Q&A. I have a couple of other things I want to say before we start. So Amanda and Forrest, you want to come up here? Crystal Lake has got a chemical procedure that's on its website under the documents and business section. We don't allow things like copper sulfate direct. We use Pickering Plus as a salt. It's not as dangerous hard on the fish. So if you're at Crystal Lake, go look at that policy procedure. It'll tell you a lot. There's also a pond management page on there you can go look at. The other thing is that there's a whole bunch of these catalogs. Excuse me, everybody. Need your attention. There's a whole bunch of these Aquacide. I'm not pushing the company, but I'm pushing their catalog because they have all kinds of like weed identification information in here. It's very useful. And they also have chemistry versus what kind of weed you're trying to take care of. And they also have safety information on it. So this has got a whole bunch of really good, useful stuff. Take a couple of copies. They sent probably about 100 of them. So don't forget to open this up. If you are a vendor and you're looking at trying to take care of something in Crystal Lake, please contact the board or me. My cards are on the back table. We just want to make sure we don't have an overkill that would affect the oxygen level in the lake, which we do measure periodically. And I also wanted Forrest is being modest. She came all the way from Paducah for this. So I mean, Amanda and everybody has really put out to come to help us out today. But that was way behind the call of duty. We appreciate it.
For tax dollars at work, I cover the state, so I could be in Pikeville today. This is not too bad.
We have a 67-pound grass carp we took out here last year.
That big?
Had we known it was that big, it would have probably got to stay with us.
That's a good one.
That's a good one.
You've done well.
And I think that, so let's do some questions. Anybody got a question? Go ahead.
I have an autumn olive on the edge of my pond that I was gonna cut down and put
Yes.
liquid Roundup on the trunk to kill it,
That's what
just
I
on
would,
the trunk.
yeah, that's what I would try. You know, when Forrest was talking about cattail suits and other things I've seen is like, being careful about this, like saturating a cloth and like wiping leaves of cattails. I don't know how dangerous that is.
That's a lot of wiping.
It's a lot of wiping if you have a small patch, but yes, the autumn olive, go ahead and please eliminate.
But the willows are okay as long as they aren't on my thing.
So I like willows and from
Some
a,
willows are great.
and from a riparian, from a buffer standpoint of that growing on the edge to give some shading, hold the soil in place, absolutely. Because we promote the use of willow stakes for stream bank stabilization type projects. So I like those. So yeah.
But those are trees. Water willow is different. If you want to see that, it's on the edge of the camera.
We have just one sidebar on that. Amanda mentioned it, and I didn't have time. Willows, woody vegetation on dams, we try to discourage.
Yeah.
If you haven't already, leave it.
No, I took
So
them
like
out.
ornamental grasses are okay?
I'm sorry?
Ornamental grasses on the dams are okay?
Yeah, I'd say any kind of grass. That sounds like an Amanda question to me, but
Anything that will make a root that will rot, make a hole with water flows through, that's.
the deal with our soils is usually you need about 30% clay content to get good compaction in soil. So anything we can get established, as soon as we can get established on a dam, is fair game. Later on, you can switch to more desirable grasses, but stabilization is key.
Hey there, as a family medicine provider, I'm interested in what treatment is safest for humans and fish, of course, but I've seen a lot of stuff on livestock that honestly scared me, or maybe the surfactant is enough to protect people that are in the water, or do you all have more information about which one's actually the safest?
So that's a great question, and we have read that too. There are concerns, you follow the label, use your protective gear, don't be out there spraying in shorts and flip flops. And believe me, a lot of people do this. So, suit up properly, don't go out there and spray in windy conditions. And when the jury is finally settled on this, I've heard all kinds of accusations of glyphosate causing everything from Alzheimer's to everything else. We're just gonna have to wait and see what the science says. And if it's such a thing where it really is dangerous and injurious to use, we're gonna have to do something else. That's my opinion.
Okay, so if you were to treat your pond with glyphosate, when would it be safe to maybe swim in it again?
According to the labels, it's fine right away. You're really not getting, you don't want to get glyphosate in the water. Now, some of it invariably is going to get in the water if you're doing a shoreline spraying. Let's not kid ourselves. But glyphosate is really inactive for any reasonable degree in the water.
And this table will show you where you can swim, how much, what you can drink in the water, that kind of stuff. There's really a lot of good stuff in here.
Yeah. So the restrictions are, these things have been lab tested, so it's safe. But that's only if you follow the label. If you go out there and do what I call the Billy Bob routine, all bets are off. If some is good and more is better, that's when people get in trouble.
Another question over here.
I've used the Aquamaster product also when we were trying to establish a buffer. Sometimes we want to kill the turf that's growing right at the water's edge, and we've used that product right adjacent to the stream also. In terms of like getting back in, like this is not based on my research, but my own personal opinion and what little I know about the decomposition of glyphosate. I would wait several days. My understanding is photodegradable, so it would degrade with sunlight exposure. I wouldn't like spray it and jump in. So that would be my own personal perception.
Yes. And some of this is common sense. I mean, if you've got a thick stand of this stuff, go from a boat and spray towards the land. Don't spray from the land out towards the water. So you want to be a little smart about this stuff. But here again, a lot of it's management's the key. Don't wait till you get to one of these impenetrable, hard to treat stands.
Question
before you treat.
Yeah, pond I have inherited it with the trees on it. And some of them are the emerald ash or killed by the emerald ash borer. I go ahead, they're dead. Can I go ahead and cut them down if they look so bad, or is that gonna enhance the quickness of the roots rotting and the water getting through?
If the tree is really dead, those roots are going to rot at the same rate as to whether there's any growth above ground as below.
There's a little growth, so just maybe leave them for a while.
If they're not a hazard to fall on you or somebody who's there, I think I would leave them. But if you feel like there are enough people around where it's a risk that they could fall and injure somebody, then I would go on.
Ash borers haven't got out.
But just leave the root system there, because yes, like Forrest said, if it's dead, it's going to decompose at the same rate if it's exposed or not. But leave the root there.
The problem with this is that the roots grow in the dam. When the roots rot, they leave a cavity for water to follow through and tunnel through the dam, and it can compromise the dam and cause a failure. Yes.
Could you just clarify a little bit on the dam side? That dam side. What would be something good to plant on established? It's already established, except for muskrat.
Yeah. Muskrat's a whole other problem. Just grasses of some sort.
Grasses would be good.
Yeah. I mean, you want to stay away from the woody stuff. And really, just mowing it a couple times a year will probably discourage that.
So just let it get up.
Right.
You know, yeah, I mean, you don't have to, it doesn't have to look like a golf course out there.
You can even mow it high. So if you want to mow it 2 to 3, 4 times a year, if you mow it as high as your, your setting on your mower will go, your bush hog, then you at least have some above ground growth. So it's just, not scalping. the
Dams are real prone to erosion. You want to build a 3 to 4 to 1 slope. Over time, it'll go like this. You'll have a 1 to 1 or something like that, and then the waves will hit it and the soil will slough off.
You just brought up the subject of mass struts. How do you get rid of them?
Whiskey and aspirin.
Your neighbors have an idea.
Yeah. Hunting them out, shooting them, trapping. If you're in an urban area, you can't really go out there and shoot them. There are some publications that have waterline screening. It's expensive, but trapping them, you really got to get on muskrats because they can ruin a dam.
Forrest, earlier you mentioned the phosphate levels were low. I should make everybody aware that there are free phosphate kits available from the Cooperative, the conservation group up here. If you need to know who they are, you go out to Jefferson, 146 is on the right side, just after the.
They're off the screen.
They're off the
You're
screen?
looking at conservation district.
Yeah,
They're
that's
down in Blackburn.
They are, okay, but they will do a phosphate test. And you might want to do that before you fertilize, because you may not need fertilize.
You're talking about a soil test?
So the soil test includes.
Yeah, so that would be extension office, sorry. I
Oh,
thought you
okay.
meant a water test.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, get your soils tested for lawns. I don't know about all these lawn services that come around, but some of these folks, and this is not to belittle commercial operations, but some of these folks are in the business of selling stuff. So find out what you need in terms of your particular soil.
Be aware that if you live here, we test that in the lake. But the test measurements are so low, we can't reliably measure them. But we've got 80 acre-feet out here of pond surface, so it dilutes really fast. So if you have a local problem, you should just come out and sample closer to the problem.
This may not really need to be brought up right now, but in my backyard last night, I counted 79 geese. Geese is a big problem on this lake too. We all need to come up with some kind of solution to eliminate some of them, because there's just too many.
Yeah, that's a problem nationwide.
79 one time.
How do you get rid of them?
So you can deter them with tall grasses because, or give your buddy a 6-pack and just go, out of town for a day or two. And so having the tall grasses, it makes them feel like there's predators in the area, and so they're going to move to somewhere else. We also have a publication on how to control them. You can add all the eggs. You can get close enough to the nest. Depends on how people feel about that. You can oil the eggs. Like you can put an oil on the outside of the surface, and then the embryo won't develop. So there are a couple of those are some.
Another thing that I was saying, if you're building a pond, do not put an island in the pond. Geese love islands. It shields them from coyotes and everything else that eats their eggs, including you, to breaking them and other things. They're very pretty. You can take a picture of a pond with an island in it, put it on your wall.
Are they not protected species?
You gotta get.
I think there's a
They are protected species, but you've got two options. You can apply for a permit to take them out, and you can also ask the Department of Wildlife to actually net them while they're molting. So that's like.
So there are some, and I think we have them as a problem on campus, also in Lexington, and we have relocated. So I don't exactly know what that is.
So now we've got
I'm
your
sorry.
2 days. No, I think you can have year-round Easter egg on site. That's what I would do. You gotta draw the line somewhere.
I'm just curious about the legality.
Oh, it's probably illegal.
We have a publication on it.
Okay,
Called
good.
Tracy.
Listen to Amanda
She
on
can
this.
get you the publication, but those are, I think those are acceptable methods, but you may need to have a permit to do that or apply with Fish and Wildlife. It's always better to ask Fish and Wildlife. Yeah. Tracy?
That is, that whole subject is best answered by Kentucky Fish and Wildlife. I feel like that's the governing body in this state. And you really don't want to get on the wrong side of any wildlife laws. You really need to check in with them if it's an issue and you want more information.
Does anyone try to eat them?
Years ago, Fish and Wildlife, they're not gonna come out of the hard times that we're really excited to involve them. They will do an audit of your pond for free if you want, so they'll tell you what all's in there, they'll tell you a lot about a lot of the things we're talking about here. Terry Crawford's who I used to work with, I think he's retired.
Jim Crosby for this area, Jeff Crosby, but they
Yeah,
stopped
Jeff.
doing electroshocking because after COVID, they stopped doing it, so.
Did they?
Yeah.
Yeah, most of these folks, there's entire departments in universities devoted to animal damage control. There are fact sheets on this stuff. Canada geese, muskrats, these things are not a Kentucky problem, they're a national problem.
Can you comment on the weed problem? Is that a Kentucky problem?
The weed problem?
Yeah, is the whole world see this?
Around the globe. I mean, especially man-made ponds, human-made ponds seem to be conducive to these monocropping of invasive weeds. I don't know why, and we also have plenty of invasives in our larger natural bodies of water that have come in from other places. So again, invasive plants, invasive animals, these are nation worldwide problems, not just a Kentucky problem.
It's probably obvious, but a dog will chase geese off.
A dog, border collies will, they're used at airports to keep waterfowl off of runways and this sort of thing. But they take a lot of work. Somebody's got to be out there with them. There's all kinds of stuff.
Like 1 or 2 more questions, and then we got to keep, and then we'll break. We'll do the drawing, and we'll do some survey stuff, and then you can have these discussions in smaller groups. You're welcome to stay here, but we do need to keep on schedule. So Tim had one, Mary had one. We'll just see how it goes.
Not a question, but a quick statement. Green lasers, geese don't like them. So
Yes.
From a long
2 questions at one time. That's great.
From a long distance, you can scare them out of your yard, but you don't scare them with your neighbors.
One of our issues here at Crystal Lake is silt. It's been silting in worse and worse, and I know all about the upstream controls, and we've been working with some folks. Jim has been really instrumental in kind of helping us work towards getting a grant for some retention ponds upstream. That's great, but we've got the problem now in the lake. Is there any solution other than dredging? And how do you get a permit for dredging?
Organic matter will decompose, and there are things you can do to aerate, some other things to try to limit organic matter, but inorganic, it's there. That's physically removed.
Okay.
And I mean, in terms, was this follow-up question about a permit to how to do it? About dredging? Yeah, you should call it the Division of Water. And I think for Oldham County, it would be, Frankfurt would be the regional office to try to get stepwise.
Well, and we're part of the Curry Ford watershed,
Yeah.
so that has also been an issue.
Right. The Forest Park, I think, dredged some of their ponds at one point, and they had to get a permit to do that. But then it is expensive, and then you gotta figure out where you're gonna take
What are you gonna do with
this.
this?
Exactly.
Be aware that the state requires you to remove the silt to out of your watershed, which just means it's in somebody else's watershed. So there is a group that's trying to make a business out of taking the silt from the MSD basins and mix it with compost and sell it as soil. So if that actually takes off, we will actually have a market for silt and vegetation.
I think commonly what's done with this, the spoil material is piled up on the pond bed, which is not a great aesthetic.
Right.
Until it dries, because you don't want to landfill this stuff when it's wet. But often a lot of it goes.
Steve, you got a question?
Well, I just want to bring up, I'm gonna say 20 years ago, when I moved in here, and I was on the board, we had that end of the lake dredged. Not legally, but we had. So. 3 or 4 people paid for it, the club paid us back. we had to have the dam cut out and all that mud taken up on the farm above us. They buried it or spread it out, whatever they had to
Land
do.
broadcast probably.
When the Corps of Engineers found out, they threatened to have us arrested and made us quit.
Which is why you should call. Or talk to.
Listen to Amanda and not me, yeah, or I'll be in jail with you.
Okay, one or two more, and you're good. Yeah, go ahead.
I haven't heard anyone mention hardy hibiscus for the dam. My whole dam is solid bloom in another week or two. It's absolutely gorgeous and it's not woody. In fact, I don't know if this is legal, but I burn the dam every year because I have grasses and yeah, I mean, you know.
If you have an accounting, we have a managed dam out for the state, so let me just tell you, it never burn a culvert, a gorge, a river, a creek, dam on it particularly, because you don't have erosion on your dam surface. We had some sledding out issue, we had to replant this whole thing, because the state would be on the case, because that really takes out the total dam very fast. You should keep grasses and stuff on your toe, get it as far out as you can. Try not to have any large trees that can fall into your dam toe, the damage you can, and then stay away from big trees.
Yeah, because the winter during the heavy rains is when a lot of your erosion occurs, so you want to make sure you've got coverage out there. Even though the grasses or whatever, they might be dormant, it's the roots are still holding your soils.
I've done it in March in the past, right before things start growing, as opposed to trimming.
Oh, cut it, just because then we still have heavy rains, you know, traditionally into June. I can't speak for this part of the state, but we've been dry.
Well, hardy hibiscus is gorgeous.
I think if you're talking about native, I think it's also called swamp rose. And it is a native, if it's the native one. Hardy, there's differences though. If it's a horticultural variety, I mean, I don't think it's aggressive in how it spreads.
This came on its own and it's just on the edge and it's absolutely beautiful.
I don't know.
I don't know.
It was correct.
I'm gonna have to- I'm sorry.
No, sir.
I'm gonna have to answer questions now, but remember, this is good and healthy, so I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions.
Some of us will be around.
Try and take as much of your questions outside as you can, we're gonna clean up here real quick.
We can go outside.
There is still coffee available if you want it. In the meantime, I'm gonna ask the manager for.
Oh, I get to do this. Everybody have their ticket out? All right, ticket is last three probably.
Make sure you take those weeds with you.
246. 246, the last three numbers. All right.
I need your name and address so we can take care of that. Okay, Tracy's got an announcement to make. One moment.
All right, one more thing, you guys. If you did not get one of these sheets, there's still some on the table. The reason you need one is there is a list of contact information for all the folks who are here today, plus a couple who could not make it. So you need this piece of paper. I would love for you to sign in so that we have an accurate count of who's here. And when you get done visiting vendors at Lakeside, I would love for you to fill out an evaluation of this program. It will take you probably 2 whole minutes of your time to fill this out and drop it at my table here. And thank y'all. Go outside and enjoy time with the vendors and Q&A at the lake, right? Okay.